Okay. So I want to thank you for taking the time to take part in this workshop today to help your students become better listeners. This session is going to be highly interactive. So although I'm going to be muting everybody, I'm going to be unmuting us throughout the session so that you can answer questions and participate in some of the exercises that we're going to be doing. And I'll stop so that you can ask questions throughout. I'm Laurie Weeks, your tutor coordinator, and over the next hour I'm going to share with you some of what I've learned during my 5 years of tutoring for Oakland Literacy Council and some of the things that I was taught on my way to getting a certificate in teaching English to speakers of other languages. So let's go ahead and get started. Today's agenda is I'm going to talk a little bit about why listening is particularly hard for our students, how to prepare a listening lesson, the 7 strategies that you can use to hone your students' listening skills, and then there'll be time for us to ask questions and for you to also share ideas that maybe you have that you use to help your student with listening that I haven't talked about, because collectively we all know a lot more than what just one of us knows. So let's go ahead and get started. During a normal day, the typical person listens twice as much as we speak and 4 to 5 times as much as we do what and what. Go ahead and navigate down to the chat window in the bottom of your Zoom screen and type in what you think should be in those 2 blanks. I can tell you they're verbs. We listen twice as much as we speak and 4 to 5 times as much as we do what.
So where do we, Laurie? Where do we write the answer?
In the chat window, you can chat it out to everybody.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so how many of you figured this was read and write? We listen twice as much as we speak and 4 to 5 times as much as we read and write. So listening skills are really fundamental to learning a new language. And in order for a student to have success speaking a new language, they first must be able to understand the language being spoken. Yeah, what we find at Oakland Literacy Council is that our students' listening comprehension skills lag way behind their reading comprehension. And let's take a look at why that's the case. Listening is really hard. For one thing, students can't listen at their own pace the way they can when they read. They can't stop to look up words in a dictionary or reread a sentence or work out the meaning on paper before they move on. Also, if they are listening to something on the phone or perhaps an audio recording that you as a tutor provide, they don't have the benefit of watching facial expressions and body language that would help them construct meaning from what's being said. And perhaps most importantly, Americans don't say words the way they appear in print with nice spaces between the words. They jumble things together, so it makes it hard to listen. And finally, listening really burdens our memories and our attention. So if we're distracted or we have other things on our mind, it can be hard for a listener to hold everything into their brain. All of this can lead to frustration on the part of students and make them reluctant to engage in conversations with others or to even turn on the radio when they're on the car. But the good news is that we can deliberately strengthen their listening skills and help them build the confidence that they need in order to engage in more listening activities. So how do you build a listening lesson? You want to think about 3 different components. activities that you would do before they listen to a recording or listen to you read a passage, things that they do while they are listening, and things that they do after they're done listening. So before listening exercises, you want to put your student at ease, and you want to, again, build their confidence that they're going to be successful when they start to listen to something. So you want to activate any prior knowledge they have about a subject. You might ask them to brainstorm what they know, perhaps using a mind map like what's shown on the screen here, so that they can activate vocabulary that they might already be familiar with, questions that they might have about a topic. They might predict what they're about to hear on a topic, and then you want to provide some context for them. Any type of listening exercises that's kind of ripped out of the real world, so you want to provide them with some information about who they're going to be listening to, and where the speakers are when they're talking. So you might tell them, these are two friends who are talking on the phone. Or now you're going to listen to a waiter in a restaurant taking orders from a couple celebrating their anniversary. You definitely want to preview any new vocabulary for your students or idioms that they might be hearing. Previewing vocabulary is a huge help, because if you can reduce confusion over vocabulary, you're giving your students more headspace to grasp the meaning of the material. You want to give them a task to perform before they listen. If they know what type of information they're listening for, their performance will be higher and their confidence will be raised. You also want to make it clear that it's not necessary for them to understand every single word in order to grasp the meaning of a message. It's been suggested actually through research that we only need to understand about 30% of the words that we hear in order to grasp the meaning. So all of these pre-listening activities are really a warm-up to the actual listening event. Maybe take 10-15 minutes before you begin the listening exercises. And then while you're listening, don't have your student listen for everything all at one time. You want to play the recording or read the material 3 to 4 times with them. And each time, ask them to listen for a different aspect of the passage. Give them something to do while they're listening, a checklist to follow off or blanks to fill in, something that makes them an active listener. That will help their reading comprehension. So the first time they listen, you might just ask them to listen for the gist. What's going on in this conversation? Or you might ask them to pay attention to the intonation of the speakers. Do these people seem like they're friendly with one another, or is somebody upset by something? Are they strangers? Upon subsequent listening, then you can ask them to pay attention to details and maybe make some inferences. Maybe somebody isn't saying everything that they are conveying through their tone of voice. So for example, let's say you're having your student listen to a news report about the day's highlight from the Winter Olympics. The first time through, you might just ask her to pay attention to what sporting event is this news report focusing on. Then on subsequent listenings, you might ask your student to note which country placed first, which placed second or third, and those kind of details. After listening, you want to have some kind of activity that checks their understanding. So you might have some questions that they need to answer about some of those details. You want to give them opportunity to respond to the ideas that they have heard. Maybe ask them if they agree with the speaker, what they would do in a similar situation. You could draw their attention to specific linguistic features. For example, let's say you're teaching them a new verb tense. You could ask them to pick out the verb tenses that they heard in a listening passage. And then finally, you can use this listening exercise as a springboard, particularly for speaking and writing activities. They might have a chance to role play the dialogue that they've just listened to. They might write about their own experience with a topic that you have presented to them. Okay, so I'm going to unmute here and just stop and see if anybody has any questions on the 3 components of a listening exercise. Does anybody have any questions at this stage?
No.
No, we're good?
I have a question, Laurie.
Mm-hmm.
So when you break this down, far as the before, while, and after, is it a specific amount of time you should spend on each part of it?
No, I mean, I usually say like the pre-listening is a warm-up, so that's usually a shorter time period, 10 to 15 minutes. I mean, the actual listening will depend on kind of what level your student's at. If it's a beginner, you know, maybe they're only listening to a minute. If it's a more advanced student, it would be a longer session. And the post-listening can really depend, because you might take off and have a nice discussion, or they might spend some time writing a whole paragraph. It depends what you're going to do. But yeah.
If I got my student into News for You, those articles are quite long.
Right.
And you're saying to do them 3 or 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
Would you do an entire article 3 or 4 times?
Well, you know what I've done, Janet, with News for You, because those are longer passages, is I stop the recording very often and ask a comprehension question, or I ask the student to listen for something in this paragraph, and then I'll stop it after the paragraph and discuss it, and then we'll go on and do it in chunks.
Okay, that's what I do when I meet with my students. I'll just continue doing the same thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Laurie,
Mm-hmm.
I made a comment in the chat about Burlington English and how much I love it, because it follows exactly what you're talking about. And then Hugh said, what's Burlington English? So I don't know if that's something you want to mention or leave it for the end and talk about that, because it seems to be following pretty much what you're saying is a good way of working with our ESL students.
Yeah, it sure does. And Hugh, if you want to know more about Burlington English, I can follow up with you offline about that. I'm not sure it's appropriate for your student. I want to talk to you a little bit more about that. But
okay, sure thing. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead. I'm going to mute you guys, and we'll continue on here with our first strategy. I'm going to start at the level of hearing sounds, and then I'm going to move on to words and phrases, and then entire passages of spoken English. And in all the world's languages, believe it or not, there are 800 different sounds, but any given language only uses about 40 of those sounds to form words. English, for example, only has 42. So it's very likely that your student's native language would include sounds that we don't use in English and not include sounds that we do use in English. So you can see how this would be a major problem for students learning English. In fact, research that was done comparing adult Japanese students' brains to American students' brains was very interesting. What the students did was they listened to a very monotonous recording that said rock, 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 and every so often the word lock was interspersed there. And because the Japanese language, like Korean and some other Asian languages, doesn't distinguish between the L and the R sound, the brain waves was absolutely flat for the Japanese students. They did not discern the difference when they heard the word lock, whereas the American students' brain waves showed a big spike when they heard that word that stood out from the rest. So the good news is that the same study showed that even with a limited amount of training, the Japanese students were able to tune their ears to hear the difference between the L and the R sound. So one way that we can help students pick up on sounds that they might not be familiar with in English is to focus on minimal pairs. And minimal pairs are two words that are absolutely the same, but they differ only by one sound, like the initial sound in R and L for rock and lock, or in the middle vowel sounds in bet and beat. And there's even a website that's in your tutor resource packet that shows what languages have trouble with certain sounds that you can reference and focus on those. So, and one in your packet is a link to a website that will play a recording and show a picture. Like this is a slide from this website where your student can listen to one of two minimal pairs spoken, and then they would click on the word that they think they hear. This is a really good website to assign to your student as homework, because not only can they listen to these words as much as they need to discern the difference, they can listen and repeat to practice their speaking skills. And both of the students that I've had that I've showed this website to, they actually really like doing this over and over again. And I have noticed that it's easier for them to pronounce those different letter sounds. Another activity, and this is really good for beginners, is you could show a worksheet to your student with sentences that are very similar except for a minimal pair, and read, say in sentence one, either A or B, and ask your student to point to what sentence they think they hear you say. And again, you could make up your own worksheet depending on what letter or vowel sounds are particularly troublesome with your student. Okay, so moving on from minimal pairs, another thing that is really difficult is that American speakers do not say words the same way they appear in print. So our student could understand a printed paragraph very well, but if that same paragraph was read to them, their reading comprehension goes way down. And the reason is that Americans use what linguists call reduced and connected speech. Americans tend to drop letters and compress their speech when they speak at a conversational pace. For example, what did you say becomes, well, what do you say? And that's very hard for English language learners to pick up on. There is a video that I think does an excellent job of explaining what reduced and connected speech is, and I'm just going to play a little bit of this video for you. I would recommend you show the video to your student, and the link to this video is in your resource packet. I'm going to start it here a little bit in.
One of the most important aspects of pronunciation and listening is to understand that Americans don't just speak fast, as many students believe, but that they connect their words and change the sounds of words. For example, what are you going to do becomes, what are you going to do? Connected speech allows us to speak efficiently, saying the most in the shortest amount of time, and to speak with flow and music, called rhythm. In this lesson, we will focus on how Americans link words together. Remember, understanding the rules of connected speech will not only help you to speak better, but will also help you understand native English speakers. Consonant plus vowel. When a word ends in a consonant sound and is followed by a word that starts with a vowel sound, the speaker should push that consonant sound forward and connect it to the vowel in the next word. For example, stop it becomes stop it. I need it becomes I need it. Play a song becomes play a song. Read a book becomes read a book. Consonant plus consonant. When a word ends in a consonant sound and the following word begins in the same or similar consonant sound, you will only pronounce that sound once by lengthening or holding the sound. You do not need to say the consonant sound twice. For example, best time becomes best time. Big grape becomes big grape. Good day becomes good day. Sit down becomes sit down. Listen and repeat. Samples.
Okay, so the good thing is that this video goes on beyond an explanation to provide some opportunities for your student to practice saying some of these reduced forms. And this is really just the first in a series of videos this presenter has on reduced speech. There's videos that just focus on those areas with consonant to consonant linking or vowel to vowel linking that might cause problems with your students. My student has enjoyed listening to these videos and just doing those listening and repeat exercises to practice her speech as well as her listening skills. And the links to those are also in your resource packet. So, whoops. Just to take a break, let's have some fun unraveling some reduced speech. This is one of the activities in your packet. I'm going to unmute you and see if I can have a couple volunteers to play a knock-knock joke with me. Is there anybody who's willing?
I am.
Okay, go ahead. I'm going to be X, you read Y, and then see if you can solve the riddle. This is a knock-knock joke that makes use of a reduced form. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Letter.
Letter who?
Letter in. It's cold outside. So what does letter represent in terms of reduced form?
Let her.
Mhm.
L-E-T space H-E-R.
Yep, very good. And then there's another one, knock, knock, who's there? Oliver, Oliver who? Oliver friends are coming over, which of course is all of her. So, all right. So one way that you can teach reduced speech to your students is as a pre-listening activity is on a whiteboard is first explain to them how our written form of English gets reduced down. So you would say when we're writing, we might say, I am going to go, or we might use the contraction, I'm going to go. And that's what we would do when we write. But when we speak, sometimes the oo sound in to becomes so that the word to becomes ta. And finally, sometimes we drop that final G and compress. We drop the word to or ta entirely and it becomes gonna. I'm gonna go. And you would want to point out to your student that we don't write I'm going to go or I'm gonna go, but that is perfectly acceptable to speak that way. Okay, so one of the activities in your packet is an audio to a conversation that makes use of reduced speech that your students can listen to. This exercise focuses on how the word your, the contraction for you are, becomes your in conversation. It's a conversation between two former neighbors who bumped into each other after not having seen each other for a long time. And the exercise comes with a transcript with blanks in it where the student can fill in parts of the conversation while they are listening to it. I'm going to unmute you now because we've talked about how a pre-listening exercise here might be to teach how that reduced form comes into being between written speech and spoken speech. We would listen to the conversation and give our student the opportunity to listen to it. Can anybody think about what an appropriate post-listening activity for this would be?
Ask each other questions.
I mean, yeah, I've unmuted you. So if you have an idea of what you might do for a post-listening exercise, go ahead and share it with the others.
What if you talk in a reduced speech pattern and have the student write it as it should be written in formal English?
Yeah, absolutely. To translate it back.
Right.
Yeah, that would be a great activity. Anybody else have another idea?
I'm not sure if this is what she, oh, I'm sorry.
There is no right answer to this. I'm just looking for ideas.
I'm not sure if this is what she just said, but if you kind of do the opposite of what we're doing here.
Yeah, I think that is what she said. Translate it back into the formal speech.
Or have her read it and then say it, as opposed to just the listening.
Right, to practice the dialogue so that that listening exercise becomes a speaking exercise. Yep. Okay.
Another thing, oops, I'm sorry. Another thing you can do is ask questions about the meaning of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, what was her father doing with his friends? Oh, you know,
Mm-hmm.
questions like that.
To see how well they understood. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, the exercise that's in your packet has some comprehension questions with it and suggestions for discussion that would go along with it. Any questions on reduced and connected speech before we go on? Because I know that that's probably a new concept.
I have one.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Well, I think sometimes it's important to get them to use reduced speech. My students usually have children, and their kids can do it. They can say gonna and would ya and so on, and getting their mouths around those sounds is really important so that they understand what they're saying is what they're hearing. It's the same thing. Because they're used to the formal, since they usually read and write very well, but speaking and listening are so hard for them.
Mm-hmm.
So getting them to use those new reduced forms of the words, I think, is an important activity too.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting. I was working with my student on some reduced forms, and then the next week we were talking about the verb used to express something that happened in the past but no longer happens. And she asked, so what would the reduced form of that be?
Used to.
And it's like, exactly. So, you know, that once you make them aware of it, then they can start to tune into other places where it might be used.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. If there are no more questions, I'm going to move on to the next strategy, and that is asking your student to listen to conversations. Much of our listening happens in conversation, and that's where we encounter this reduced and connected speech, as well as idioms and phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs are a phrase made up of a verb and usually a preposition, but sometimes also an adverb that means something beyond what those two words appearing by themselves mean. And there are just a ton of recorded conversations available on the internet, as well as in the materials in your packet that you can play for your student. One of those exercises in your packet has a link to an audio file with a conversation between two women who are discussing plans for their free time. So as a pre-listening exercise, you might ask your student what hobbies they enjoy doing in their free time. You might also show them an image, such as this picture, to activate any prior knowledge they might have about coin collecting. Or if they don't have any, then you have the opportunity to explain what coin collecting is. And then tell them a little bit about the speakers. And you want to encourage your student to be an active listener during the 3 or 4 times you play a recording. The first time you listen to the conversation, you might just ask your student to discern what the relationship seems to be between these two speakers, Kim and Sarah. Are they friends or are they strangers? And we're going to take a listen to this, and then while your student is listening to the conversation, you could give him or her some comprehension questions to tick off And again, depending on what level your student is at, maybe you'd want to pause this audio at each chunk as they hear the answer to these questions. So the first question is, what is Sarah going to do on Saturday? So that's paying attention to one of the speakers. The second question is, Sarah has coins from 50 countries or 15. And notice that 50 and 15, that's a minimal pair. So that's going to be something that's hard for your student to pick up on unless they're really listening to hear the difference there. Kim asked what time the show begins, ends, and why does she ask her friend that question? Okay, so I'm going to play this recording so you get a sense of how these go, and then I'm going to unmute you to ask for answers.
Exercise 7. Sarah. Ready? Let's get started. Sarah, what are you doing on Saturday? I want to see the new Tom Cruise movie.
I would like to see his new movie, but I have plans. I am going to a coin collector's show.
You are going to a coin collector's show? I didn't know you collected coins. Is it fun?
Yes, it is a lot of fun. I have been collecting coins for 3 years. I have coins from 50 countries.
Wow, that sounds like fun.
Kim, would you like to go to the show with me?
Really? That would be great. I can see the movie later. What time does it finish?
It finishes at 5 o'clock. Why do you ask?
Well, my cousin is coming to visit at 7 p.m.
No problem. I will pick you up at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning.
Great. I can't wait.
Okay, so the first time that your student listened to this and you asked them what does the relationship seem to be between these students, they would say they probably are friendly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody want to answer question 1? If it's A, B, or C, what is Sarah doing on Saturday?
A.
A is the right answer. Sarah has coins. Question number 2. Is it A, B, or C? A again. Kim asked what time the show.
C.
C.
C. And why does Kim ask her friend that question?
B.
Okay, so you guys are excellent listeners, but your student might need to hear this a couple of times to catch all of those answers, right?
Right.
Right. Or you might need to pause it and ask the questions as you go along. So,
Laurie?
Yep.
Would it be appropriate to look at the questions first? And maybe you said that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would
before you play it.
I definitely would preview those questions and let the student actually, like if they could even tick them off as you're going through the conversation. But yeah, so they're tuning in to listen for certain things.
Okay.
And again, I mean, we're creating a positive listening experience, right? We want them to feel like they can listen and understand spoken English. So we're making it a little bit easier for them so they experience success and want to go out and engage in the broader world where they're not going to have question sheets to listen from.
Laurie, how do we know the appropriate level to use when we're doing this with our students?
I would say trial and error. The packet that I put together has everything from beginner level to really advanced level exercises in it.
And it's clear, it's written that way? Like it shows you which level?
No, it's not, unfortunately. That would have been a good thing for me to put in there. I did put on the links to the online resources that some of them are more appropriate for different levels, or that the resources themselves have different levels that you can tune into. Like the conversation sites that I put on there are organized by easy, intermediate, or advanced. I would always start with maybe something a little easier than what you think your student can handle, just again, so they don't tune out to the whole experience. Can you think of a post-listening activity that you could do following this conversation about free time that might involve writing or speaking?
She could write a summary of what the whole listening activity was about.
Excellent idea.
Mhm.
You could write about her own hobby.
Right. They could write a paragraph or talk about their own hobby.
You can also just have a conversation with her back and forth about what both of your hobbies are and ask her to repeat back what you've said, like her understanding of what you've said.
Mm-hmm. If you remember from the tutor training, we do something called directed dialogue where you kind of write out the dialogue and then you practice saying it to each other so you could create your own dialogue. Good. So you can see how this listening activity can be extended. All right, so the next strategy is fill in the gaps while listening. Gap fill activities or close activities as they're called are exercises that you can do while listening that can be used with all levels of students and all kinds of oral messages, either recordings that you find or things that you read aloud to your student. They could be conversations, they could be songs, it could be news stories, even lectures, or a fictional story that you find, that anything that is of a topic that might be of interest to your student. And the gaps that you fill in, you can really pick and choose because you can take a transcript and just delete some of the words yourself, depending on what you want to focus on. Maybe you want them to pay attention to some of those reduced forms. Maybe you want them to pay attention to phrasal verbs or idioms, or you can just delete like every 6th or 7th word and let them fill in the blanks. So here's an exercise from a song where you might play, and this is one of the exercises in your packet, where there's a short clip from a song. Songs are great places where the singers use reduced forms. I'm going to play this little clip and see if you can tell what the 2 reduced forms are that you hear in the blanks. I just blank, tell you how I'm feeling, blank, make you understand. I just want to tell you how I'm feeling. Gotta make you understand. Okay. So anybody?
And
gotta.
Have
Wanna
to.
and gotta.
And gotta.
And gotta.
Yep, wanna and gotta. So again, you could pre-teach that by showing how the forms get reduced and then play a clip from the song and then practice using that in a speech. Here's another kind of fun activity. Let's see, there's in your packet some brain teasers. So you could read a brain teaser and your student would have to fill in the clues. These are the words that are highlighted here in yellow and underlined. And then you'd ask your student to solve it. So let's see if you can solve this one. What has keys that open no doors, has space but no room, and allows you to enter but not go in?
A keyboard.
Yeah.
Holy cow. That's great. I asked my family members about that one. No one could figure it out. So that's good.
That's very good.
So there's a whole bunch of fun, brain teasers like that you can do that just practice their listening skills and have a little bit of fun. On a more serious note, you could also have your student listen to an informational recording on some topic that that interests them. This particular exercise pertains to a brief lecture about what Americans like to eat. And all of the blanks here have to do with percentages. So you could have your student read this transcript and then predict what they might hear by making some guesses about what percentage of the population, for instance, eats breakfast and eats that at home. And then they could listen to see if their prediction is accurate. So the pre-listening exercise, kind of active, gets them thinking on the topic, gets them to think what they might already know, and then when they're listening, they're going to check their answers. So there are several gap fill exercises in your packet and links to more that you can fill online. All right, so moving on to the strategy number 5. This is following directions. The first thing you can do is called total physical response, and this is particularly useful with beginner students. That's just a term, total physical response. That means you ask your students to do something physical based on your instructions. So for an absolute beginner, you might ask them to shut the door or to turn to a certain page in their textbook. For an intermediate or advanced student, you might read a passage and ask them to arrange slips of paper with parts of the story there into the correct sequence as an activity. And again, they're using their hands for those kinesthetic learners. You're giving them a way to show that they understood listening. Another exercise that's in your packet is to follow directions to draw a picture. And this particular activity is a great way to practice your students' understanding of prepositions like over and under. You would tell your student to draw a lamp on a table, for example, and a cat under the table. And finally, you can find tutorials for almost everything on the internet, from making a paper airplane to making vegetable soup. You could do a tutorial together, or you could assign your student to follow the tutorial as homework and then snap a picture of whatever they created to show you the next time you're together. Even showing your student verbally, verbally guiding them through downloading an app on their smartphone to practice vocabulary or speech would be a way to help them follow directions. They could, could ask them to call their bank and follow the phone tree to determine what their current balance is. One of the other activities that's in your packet is about map reading, something that directly correlates to our CASAS tests. And it's also a very practical skill for your students to have if they like to travel. So this map is in your packet. You might ask your student to draw the compass directions and make sure they understand north, south, east, and west. And then you could verbally give them directions to, for instance, start at the bank here in the lower left-hand corner, and then travel north on West Street, then east on Main, and ask them what the second building on the north side of the street would be. And hopefully they would say the library. A post-listening exercise for this would be for them to give you directions to practice their speaking skills. Again, I've done this with my students. It's something they really enjoy and is helpful to them. So the next strategy number 6, is take dictation. Dictation is a really useful technique that forces students to think about every word and sound that they hear. By writing down what they heard and then checking their answers, you as the tutor can immediately see what they heard or what they might have misunderstood. So you can have them take down phone messages, very practical skill to have. They might take down typical greetings or phrases, lines of dialogue, even lecture notes. And there are websites in your packet with links where students can go and listen to a bit of spoken speech and directly transcribe what they hear into a blank on the screen, and then check to see how close they were to the original. So again, this is something you can do with them, or you could assign as homework. For more advanced students, you might have them listen to a longer passage like a lecture or a news report, and then give them some sort of graphic organizer like an empty outline, and have them focus on listening for signal phrases, things like first, second, third, or most importantly, that would signal to them when the speaker is saying something new or shifting directions or emphasizing a point. You can also do something very, very simple. This is an activity from your packet on proverbs. So as a pre-listening activity, this suggests, talking about what a proverb is and that every culture has proverbs. And this exercise is going to focus on learning some American proverbs. You would pre-teach some expressions or vocabulary that you have. Then you might dictate, when the cat's away, the mice will play. And then what kinds of post-listening activities could you do for your students if you've had them, if you've dictated a proverb to them?
I would want to know, I would want to ask about proverbs from his country, to share some and ask him to translate for me and help me understand what some of his might be.
That's great. Great cultural exchange.
Very often they have the same proverb, just worded differently, a different example, but it means the same thing.
Yep.
Maybe
All right.
context.
Teach the context of the proverb. Yeah. So they could write down a proverb. They could explain what it means. Teach you one. Great. Okay. So moving on. The final strategy is watching videos together. Videos can open up a new cultural world to your student. And like songs, sometimes they will really enjoy this. I know my student particularly and I like to watch movie trailers together. By giving your students short segments of video, they have the benefit of listening along with seeing facial expressions and body language and even hearing sound effects that they might otherwise miss out on just doing an audio recording. So besides movie trailers, you could show scenes from TV shows, music videos, TED Talk type tech lectures, or video tutorials. And here are some things that you can do while you are watching a video. You could watch without the sound, and the student would have to guess what the video is about, or maybe if it's a movie, the genre of the movie. And then you would play it again with the sound maybe a couple times to confirm whether or not their guess is accurate. You could freeze a frame, so stop the video and ask the students to predict what will happen next, and then play to confirm their prediction. I don't generally recommend that you have them turn on the subtitles while they're watching a video, because then all they're doing is practicing their reading skills rather than their listening skills. But you could ask a student to write a subtitle to the video. You could give them some sentence strips. If you watched a movie trailer, for instance, and you could write on sentence strips what the main segments of the trailer are and ask your student to put them in the correct sequence. Or you could ask comprehension questions after they have finished watching the video. So we're gonna try this. This is for a more advanced student, and this is in your packet. There is a link to a website that has clips from popular movies. In this case, it's from The Great Gatsby. And it comes with questions online that you can just click online and then check your answers right away. So before you listen to this, watch this clip, you would want to probably explain who Gatsby is, that the book is part of the American canon of famous literature, what time period maybe the movie is set in, and that the clip is taking place at a party at Gatsby's house. So we're going to listen to the clip, and here's some things to listen for, and you would review these with your students. At the beginning, what does the woman say she remembers? Is she remembering his name, his favorite drink, where he lives? What does the man compare the party to? A park where newsmen hang out, an amusement park, a museum. Who received the invitation to the party? Was it just one of them? And if so, who, or both of them? And then it's asking the listener to draw an inference. What would you assume about Nick, the guy in the movie? Does he know Gatsby, and how well does he know him? and then listen to some rumors about Gatsby, and which one of them is not a rumor. All right, so if you're ready, I'm going to play the clip.
I thought I might see you here.
Hello.
I remembered you live next door.
It's like an amusement park.
Shall we?
Did you get an invitation?
People aren't invited to Gatsby.
I was. Seems I'm the only one. Who is this Gatsby?
He was a German spy during the war.
Petty pardon? Nick Carraway.
A German spy?
No. He's the Kaiser's assassin.
I heard he killed a man once.
It's true. Kills for fun, free of charge. He's certainly richer than God.
You don't really believe he killed a man, do you?
Well, let's go find him and you can ask him yourself. I thought I might.
Okay, so at the beginning, what does the woman say she remembers about Nick?
Where he lives.
Where he lives.
Mm-hmm. What does the man compare the party to?
An amusement
park.
Mm-hmm. Who received an invitation to the party?
Man.
Yeah. And then what about 4?
He doesn't know.
Doesn't know.
Uh-huh. And which of the following is not a rumor?
He won all his money.
Gambling.
Right. So you guys did very well, obviously, because you're native English speakers. When I did this with my student, we had to listen several times to this to catch the meaning. So that's definitely more for an advanced student.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So one,
Great.
yes.
Oh, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
I've been using YouTube videos with my student, like mostly instructional ones, cooking, how to play golf and so on. But on YouTube, you can slow the speech down.
Oh, great.
So, I listened to the video beforehand, and if the person's talking really fast, I slow it to 75%. Then I listen to it again, make sure it still sounds okay. Is that a good strategy
for sure.
to do?
Yes, thank you for sharing that.
Okay.
Yeah, the goal of us as tutoring is to help them be successful with listening so that they'll want to go out and, engage more in conversation groups and turn on the TV news, turn on the radio, and try to do more listening that isn't, we're scaffolding, we're providing a scaffold around the listening activity for them. So whatever we can do to make it easier for them so that they have success is a great idea. All right, so I wanted to just flip over to the resource packet briefly. If anybody has any trouble downloading this packet from the website, and I apologize for first putting out an unshareable link, just email me and I'll help get it to you. It turned out to be like a 40 megabyte file, so it was too big to attach to an email. That's why I had it downloaded, but it's really something you want to put on your hard drive because it has so many links to it that'll take you to different places. And if you open it up in Acrobat Reader, I just want to make sure you guys are familiar with the bookmark icon over here, because when you click on it, what you get is a clickable table of contents to different exercises. And a lot of these exercises come with links, like up here at the top of this gap fill exercise, to an audio file that you can play. That's on the OLC SharePoint. And it will come, some of these come with pre-listening exercises suggested. If there was some sort of, in this case, this is a fill in the blank type activity, it's been converted into a fillable PDF. So if you're tutoring remotely and you want to use these, you can go ahead and share this document with your student and they can fill it in on their screen and you can see how they're doing. At the beginning is a list of online resources, and all of these are clickable. These are, like, for instance, the videos that focus on reduced speech, but there's lots of resources here for you to use beyond the exercises. Like I said, the exercises kind of run the gamut from beginner to advanced. All right, so one last bonus question. This doesn't rise to the level of whole separate strategy, but it's something fun to do. The New York Times has a website called What's Going On in This Picture, where at least once a week they take a kind of a busy, interesting photo, and you can just describe what's going on in the picture, but say something that's wrong. And tell your student, I'm going to describe this picture, but I'm going to make an error. See if you can catch my error. So in this case, you might say this child is, jumping over a pretend horse jump with a white pony. And that would be the mistake in it. So that's just a fun exercise, again, to help them test their listening skills. At this time, I wanted to open it up to see if you guys had any other questions, or if there's things that you do with your student that you'd like to share that work particularly well with listening skills.
Laurie, does our students all have capability to get into this program?
By the program, you mean the Tutor resource packet?
Yeah, listening packet.
If you share the link with them that I sent you, they can download it.
Okay, I'll try.
Yep.
So Laurie, is it any part of this that would be good for a basic student?
The minimal pairs activity is good for basic students.
Okay.
The conversations, again, the website links that I posted in the online resources, both of them have easy conversations to listen to.
Okay.
Even the dictation, just a proverb is a very one sentence long thing that you could dictate to them.
Laurie, this is the same link you sent in your email, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question, Laurie. When my student's eyes kind of glaze over and I can tell he's not understanding my speech, and I speak slowly, very clearly, I use the chat box and I type in what I'm saying, but now I'm thinking that maybe that's not such a good idea, huh?
Well, you want to be understood, so no, I wouldn't say that's a bad idea. At certain points you want to just focus on their listening skills. So I don't know if you're communicating instructions or something like that, then if you want to write them out, that's going to help the student.
Yeah, it seems to kind of, I watch his eyes and I can see he's reading in the chat box, and then he'll go, oh, now I understand.
Okay.
Okay.
Then go ahead and do that. This will take some experiment to find out what listening level is appropriate for them. And the good news is that you can play things more than once until they get it. So just to sum up, I want you to remember the 3 stages of a listening lesson, that there's lots of things that, did somebody else have a question?
Yes. Where should I try to save this book on my computer? I know it's a computer question, but I'm really weak in that area.
Well,
should I just bookmark it, or?
I have created a special folder on my hard drive called Oakland Literacy Council.
Yep.
And then I just save things like that in that folder.
Okay.
So the folder would be on, my desktop, and then I can navigate to it. One other point that I wanted to make to you is from the research that's been done on how students become better listeners, there's something called metacognition, which is you want to encourage your student to reflect on which listening strategies help them the most. Like maybe it's doing a mind map on a subject before they listen to a recording on that subject. It'll be different things, and again, maybe it's organizing sentence strips if they're more of a kinesthetic learner. But asking them to really think about what works for them is a way that'll help them then use that skill again and again when they are listening to things in the future, and it'll help them become even a faster learner. Okay, so as I mentioned, I sent the link to my slides in the chat window. If you save that link, you can have access to all of the notes that I've presented here. Again, email me if you have any trouble on accessing them. And then I'm just going to make a plug, as I always do, for our Facebook group that's just for Oakland Literacy Council tutors. If you are on Facebook, this is a great group to join because I post things, resources that I find in between the tutor newsletters to the Facebook group. And it's a way for you guys to reach out to each other and share ideas or ask questions too. And then finally, during this quarantine period, we're doing a tutor coffee break every Thursday at 9 a.m. via Zoom. If you are interested in that, just let me know and I can send you the link too. We just kind of share what things we're working on, and if you need any extra help, I'm there to answer your questions. All right, any final questions before we break for today?
No, this packet you put together is phenomenal, Laurie. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Yes, it is.
I agree.
I agree.
Thank you, Laurie.
All of those,
A lot.
all of those pages are from books that the OLC owns. So if you find that one book works really well with your student, just let me know. I can scan more pages from it, or when the office reopens, we can check out the whole book. Those are just kind of samplings. Well, thank you guys so much. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you.
I'm looking at the packet, and for the I'm opening it. I opened it. It opened in Adobe Reader Touch, and the fill-in sheets are like blank.
Adobe Reader Touch.
Yeah, I don't know. Does it have to be opened in? Does anyone else?
I would open an Acrobat Reader, which you can download.
Acrobat Reader. Okay, I downloaded.
That's a free
try
download.
that.
Do
Okay.
our students need to download that as well?
Yes, I mean most computers have that on there automatically, but yes,
Okay,
it's a
I'll try
free
that.
download. All right, any other questions?
Nope. This is great.
Thanks,
Thank you
Laurie.
so
All right.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
Okay, you too.
Thank you.
Stay safe, everybody.
You too.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.